In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on February 6th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Dayton versus VCU. This one sets up as a Friday night Atlantic 10 battle in Richmond, scheduled for the evening of February 6, 2026 in America time at VCU's home floor, even if a few books list it a day earlier because of their time zones. Dayton walks in with a 15-8 overall mark and a 6-4 run in league play, trying to show that the recent wobble really did stop with that tight win over St. Bonaventure. CU counters with a 17-6 overall record and an 8-2 clip in the conference, riding a 5-game surge and sitting above the Flyers in the standings inside the Siegel Center. Oddsmakers are treating the Rams as clear favorites in this building, not as a coin flip side, which already tells you how the broader market views the gap between these two right now. Dayton has carried itself like a calculated group this season, putting up roughly 76.2 points per night on about 45% shooting, with 3-point numbers in the low 30s and a heavy taste for living at the free throw line. That free throw rate sits near the top of the national charts, and it fits the eye test. Long half-court possessions, deliberate drives, and a lot of trips where the clock is stopped and someone in a Flyers jersey is standing at the stripe. VCU under Phil Martelli Jr. has leaned into depth and tempo just enough to get to around 84 points per game on close to 46.7% from the field and about 36.5% from deep, but without turning every night into chaos. Their adjusted pace hovers just under 70 possessions, quicker than some past VCU seasons, but still controlled, which matters when you compare it with how steadily they score. At home, that approach has translated into an 11-2 record in the building, where the noise feels like an extra defender whenever visiting guards are trying to call out a set, and you can almost feel the possession shrinking before the shot goes up. For Dayton, the official charts still have guard Javon Bennett running the show, fresh off a 20-point night against St. Bonaventure and carrying no current injury tag heading into this one. The one confirmed loss on that side is freshman guard Jaron McKee, shut down for the season after shoulder surgery, so he is simply not part of this particular equation anymore. Some older notes mention forward Giant Simon with a question mark, but more recent injury lists do not spell out a clear status for him, so his situation sits in that uncertain, not fully confirmed bucket. On the VCU side, the core rotation is intact, although the depth has been trimmed, with forward Christian Fairman away long-term for personal reasons and big man Obinaya Okafor also sidelined for an extended stretch by an undisclosed issue. Freshman guard Nick Lewis, who has already grabbed Rookie of the Week attention, shows up with a questionable tag for this game, which might nibble at the Rams' backcourt creation but does not tear out the heart of their offense. Even with those absences, the Rams' profile as a well-rounded favorite, top 50 nationally in scoring, a double-digit average scoring margin around plus 10.6, and a shooting profile that spreads the damage instead of leaning on one trick. Dayton, for all its discipline, has leaned on free throws and late-game execution, while VCU has been far more comfortable turning good shooting and timely stops into wins by more than one possession. These programs have a history in this building that leans toward the Rams, including a 5-point win over Dayton last season in Richmond, and while history does not decide the new tip-off, it does echo the idea that the Flyers often get squeezed when the crowd cranks up. Put the whole package together, the stronger overall efficiency, the louder and friendlier gym, the slightly thinner but still effective home rotation, and you get a favorite whose statistical profile actually fits being expected to win by multiple possessions instead of being inflated by name value alone. As our first pick for this matchup, the VCU Rams to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. VCU games have been living in the high scoring range, with the Rams dropping around 84 points and allowing about 73.5 on average, so their box scores read like fireworks. Dayton tilts a little lower, with about 76.2 scored and roughly 70.7 allowed, which still lands their typical final tallies in the mid-140s. Honestly, if you did nothing but mash those averages together in a quick spreadsheet, you would talk yourself into expecting a very high combined total here. Let me explain. The way Dayton gets those points is not exactly friendly to a constant up and down scoreboard. The Flyers spend a huge portion of their possessions hunting contact, piling up free throw attempts, and they cash those at around 75 to 76%, which is efficient but also slows everything to a crawl. Their outside shooting lives in the low 30s from beyond the arc, which keeps them from turning every possession into a three-point barrage, and that keeps a natural cap on how wild the scoring can get. Long half-court sets, drives to the rim, whistles, and players standing at the line, it all drains the clock even when the offense is technically working. VCU, on the other side, looks like a pure pace monster if you only skim the scoring, but the underlying style is more about efficiency than speed. Their tempo number lands in the high 60s in terms of possessions, only modestly above average, and the real punch comes from hitting roughly 46.7% of their shots and around 36 to 37% from three. So the Rams put up big totals without needing breakneck speed, which means when they run into a patient defense, the whole game can settle into something more controlled than their season scoring might suggest. Dayton brings that kind of patient defense, giving up a bit over 70.7 points a night on roughly 43 to 44% shooting, and sitting near the top of the national charts in turnover rate forced. That combination, forcing mistakes while keeping opponents from roasting them from the field, has a funny effect. It puts a cap on opponents while still making every possession feel like a grind. Layer on the fact that this matchup hits deep in the conference schedule when both coaching staffs have seen the other side on film all season and know the pet sets and counters by heart, and you get a game plan environment that leans more toward careful adjustments than free-flowing offense. VCU has also been strangely uncomfortable in one-possession finishes this year, sitting at 0-2 in those nail-biters, which has encouraged them to slow games down and protect leads instead of racing up and down the floor when things get tight. The injury and availability picture tilts subtly toward a slightly lower scoring ceiling too. VCU will again be without Christian Fairman and Obinia Okafor, both front-court pieces, and that limits some rim pressure and depth even if it does not erase their main scoring options. With Nick Lewis carrying a questionable label, there is at least a chance that some of the secondary creation and pace from the backcourt is muted as well. Dayton, by contrast, has only the long-term loss of Jaron McKee, who had not yet carved out a major offensive role before his season-ending shoulder issue, so their scoring structure is more or less what you have seen all year. It is fair to say, and this part is openly speculative, that both coaches are likely to lean into shorter, trusted rotations and more conservative tempo in a loud building with league seeding on the line, which usually shaves a few possessions and a few points off what the raw season averages would predict. When you blend the offensive and defensive efficiency numbers together rather than just staring at points per game, the picture that emerges is of a contest that lands lower than what a surface-level reading of the scoring logs might lead you to expect. The market projection leans toward a high-octane shootout, but the styles, the whistle-heavy approach from Dayton, the efficient yet not frantic production from VCU, and the late-season familiarity between these rosters all stack up on the quieter scoring side of things. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Connecticut versus St. John's. This one sets up like a classic Big East heavyweight bout, the kind where the number on the board looks small, but the stakes feel huge. You have UConn Huskies men's basketball rolling in with a record of 22-1-0, perfect in league play, and playing some of the most complete basketball in the country, top tier on defense and comfortably efficient on offense. They like to slow things down, grind through half-court sets, and use their size and composure to squeeze opponents, and that style has translated to a double-digit average margin in conference games and a habit of making good teams look slightly worse than they really are. St. John's on the other side brings that different kind of chaos. Rick Pitino on the sideline, a front court that can really move, and a roster that has been rebuilt with high-level transfers who actually fit together. Their record of 17-5-0 with only one league loss is not an accident, and their energy at Madison Square Garden feels less like a neutral floor and more like a second home game in the city. They fly around, pressure the ball, crash from the wings, and use that length from guys like Zuby Ejiofor, Dylan Mitchell, and Bryce Hopkins to turn loose balls into easy points and to make opponents think twice about driving straight into the lane. The twist is that UConn has already shown they can stay calm inside that kind of storm. They have a guard in Silas Demery Jr. who keeps the ball moving and the offense organized, a freshman scorer in Braylon Mullins who can flip a game with a quick burst, and a big like Terrace Reed Jr. who sets the tone around the rim and on the glass. Recent wins where they ran away from quality opponents, including that statement showing against Creighton and the blowout of Xavier, were not just about hot shooting, they were about winning every little battle, rebounds, loose balls, screen angles, help defense, all the small stuff that covers spreads. St. John's still has that deep rotation feel, but the season-ending injuries to younger pieces like Kasper Poto and Imran Suljanovic quietly trim some of the flexibility at the margins, and a question mark around Hanja Tamba adds another layer to their front-court depth chart. In a game that figures to be incredibly physical, that extra reliable size and experience on the UConn side, combined with their comfort playing at this tempo and their strong track record at the Garden, nudges the matchup toward the group that has been consistently winning by margin rather than just surviving close finishes. As our first pick for this matchup, the UConn Huskies to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. UConn brings that reputation for dragging games into methodical half courts, guarding for a full clock, and holding opponents to modest scores. And that reputation is earned. They are firmly in the elite tier defensively and are very comfortable in games where every possession matters. They do not need a wild pace to put points on the board because their offense is efficient. They are happy to work through multiple actions, hammer the offensive glass, and trust that eventually a good shot appears, especially with Mullins stretching the floor and their bigs punishing switches. St. John's pulls the game in the opposite direction. They like games that breathe, where there are extra possessions, extra chances, and plenty of trips up and down the floor. Their pressure defense is designed to generate steals, rush decisions, and long outlet passes, and when that starts working, scores can jump quickly, not just because of their offense, but because opponents get dragged into that tempo whether they really want it or not. Casual fans sometimes only look at raw points per game, but the bigger story is the combination of a fast-ish rhythm and an attack that can score inside with that strong front line and outside with confident wings, which creates a lot of ways for this matchup to turn into a high-scoring night if whistles cooperate. There is also the setting to think about. Madison Square Garden has a way of lifting shot-making, the lighting, the crowd, the theater of it, especially when both teams are ranked and everyone knows the whole league is watching. In that kind of environment, players are more willing to let it fly, coaches often ride their main scorers for heavier minutes, and once the game gets tight late, the usual parade of timeouts, quick fouls, and free throws tends to stretch the scoreboard a little beyond what the pace alone would suggest. Even if the first few minutes lean toward a slower-feeling chess match, the longer this goes, the more likely it is that the mix of St. John's pressure, UConn's efficient offense, and the late-game foul game stacks possessions and points in a way that pushes the combined score higher than people expect from a matchup that has one elite defense in it. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Bradley versus Northern Iowa. Friday night in Cedar Falls feels like a little preview of March with Bradley walking into the McLeod Center to test themselves against Northern Iowa in a classic Valley grind. Bradley sits at 16-8, Northern Iowa at 14-9, and both are right in that messy middle where every possession suddenly feels heavier than it did back in November. The styles could not really be more different. Bradley is comfortable pushing the tempo, flying around in the high 70s on the scoreboard on roughly low 70s possessions, and they like that rhythm where the ball is zipping, the wings are running, and the game feels a bit like pickup with structure. Northern Iowa prefers almost the opposite feel, more like a slow chess match where you are stuck thinking through every move, living in the low 60s on the scoreboard on about mid-60s trips, and forcing opponents to stay patient longer than they actually want to. Their defense has backed that identity up, sitting right at the top of Division I in scoring defense, holding teams to just a shade over 60 points per game. It is not smoke and mirrors either. It is structure. It is good help principles. It is making you run offense for a full possession and then finishing it with a body on a body. When you look at the efficiency side of it, the gap becomes even more interesting. Both offenses grade out in a similar ballpark on a per-possession basis, but Northern Iowa's defensive rating and league play has been noticeably stingier than Bradley's. Bradley can score, nobody is arguing that, but they have not consistently shown the same ability to string together stops in tough road environments, which is what this building tends to be in February. Meanwhile, Northern Iowa has turned the McLeod Center into a kind of quiet pressure cooker, stacking wins as hosts and cashing tickets in favorite roles while feeding off that familiar purple and gold backdrop. Bradley, once you pull them out of Peoria, turns into a little more of an adventure and not always the fun kind for people who care about the number. The history this season adds another wrinkle. The first meeting back on January 10th finished 75-69 in favor of Bradley, so the Panthers get the classic revenge shot in front of their own fans. The detail that really matters from that one is not just who won, but how it played. Even in defeat, Northern Iowa still held Bradley below Bradley's usual scoring output, which fits what we know about their defense. Now they get the second swing with last change from the bench, a home whistle, and a crowd that understands exactly how big this one is in the conference race. Roster context ties right back into how comfortable you feel with the side. Bradley's public listings do not show anyone clearly ruled out, although some earlier previews in the week still tagged Demarion Birch as questionable off an older calf issue, which creates that weird gray area where he is on the active roster and not officially out, but not mentioned quite the same way everywhere. Northern Iowa's situation is a bit more defined. Forward Marino Dubrovcic, wing Cade Corbat, and senior forward Tristan Smith have all been marked as questionable on injury reports, with Smith especially interesting because team materials still show him around double-digit scoring and strong rebounding in his 15 games, and local chatter has hinted that this Bradley matchup is a realistic spot for him to return. The core starting five that has driven Northern Iowa's defensive identity, Campbell, Bond, Hornseth, Schwieger, and Weisbrod, is intact and available, so what really hangs in the balance is depth and whether Smith can walk in and give them that extra interior presence they have not had at full strength for a bit. All of that pulls the picture in a pretty specific direction. You have the league's best scoring defense, a verified home edge, a revenge setting, and a tempo profile that reliably drags opponents into a slower, more uncomfortable game, matched up with a Bradley group that thrives when things get loose but has looked far less cozy when forced to grind for 40 minutes on the road. That combination of style, setting, and roster health tilts the spread conversation toward the team that controls pace, squeezes possessions, and owns the building, which points squarely at the Panthers' side when you look at who is more likely to cover. As our first pick for this matchup, the Northern Iowa Panthers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Market expectations frame this as one of those games where points will not exactly come falling out of the sky, a nod to Northern Iowa's reputation for turning contests into half-court puzzles instead of track meets. On the surface, the undersells itself, and honestly, you can see why people would lean that way immediately. Northern Iowa allows just a shade over 60 points per night and plays at a pace that feels like someone keeps tapping the brakes. They live around mid-60s possessions, they are happy to throw bodies at drivers, and they trust that, across 40 minutes, most college offenses will blink first against that discipline. Recent home games have reinforced that image, with several totals landing short and rewarding anyone who trusted the building to keep things slow and sticky. If you only look at that side of the ledger, it feels like a simple script, another low-scoring night, another validation of their identity. The twist is that the matchup has already shown it can crack that script. The first meeting finished 75-69, a total that rides well beyond the cautious expectations people usually hang on Northern Iowa games. Bradley's offense is a big piece of why. They average around 78 points on roughly low 70s possessions, which puts them at a little over 1 point per possession, and they are comfortable playing at that tempo across different gyms. On the road, their games have leaned toward higher scoring, with several overs cashing, which matches what you see on film, a team that keeps pushing even when the environment tries to slow them. Northern Iowa on offense is not the caricature of a 60-55 rock fight team either. They sit around 67 points a night on those slower possessions, which again is roughly a point per trip, and they shoot a solid percentage that keeps them from wasting trips. If this game settles somewhere in that 66-68 possession window, which is a reasonable middle ground between Bradley's preferred rhythm and Northern Iowa's drag, you do not actually need fireworks for the score to creep into a more generous range. You just need both offenses to play to their normal efficiency instead of Northern Iowa's defensive ceiling. Tristan Smith's status quietly matters here too. If he does get back on the floor, you are not only adding almost 10 points and meaningful rebounding from a single player, you are also shifting how Northern Iowa can attack. Suddenly there is more interior scoring, more chances to draw contact, more free throws, and fewer empty possessions where they are simply too small or too tired at the 4 and 5. Games with that kind of interior presence often end up with more whistles, and whistles usually mean the clock is stopped while the scoreboard still moves. Bradley's defense, on the other hand, has not matched Northern Iowa's standards. They give up around 73 points per game, which means if there is any Valley opponent that might make Northern Iowa's offense look a bit freer, it is this sort of matchup. Advanced numbers have painted Bradley as considerably looser on that end, especially recently, which lines up nicely with the idea of Northern Iowa finding easier looks than they typically do against the top of the conference. That is before you even get to the game script that often appears in close contests, where a tight final 2 minutes turns into a parade of intentional fouls, quick shots, and extended possessions. Totals sitting in a modest scoring range often get broken right there, not by some grand offensive scheme, but by the simple math of trading free throws for seconds. When you blend the slow reputation with the actual scoring efficiency, the prior head-to-head result, Bradley's willingness to run, the softer defense on Bradley's side, and the potential for an extra scoring punch if Smith is back, the picture shifts from a strict defensive slugfest toward a game that can sneak higher on the scoreboard than people expect. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Belmont versus Illinois Chicago. Step inside Credit Union 1 Arena on a cold February night and the whole thing feels bigger than just another conference game. Chicago crowd buzzing, student section loud, and you have this classic setup where the home team is hungry and the visitor walks in wearing the label everyone keeps whispering about, the favorite. Belmont arrives with a sparkling 21-3 record, sitting at 11-2 in league play, on an 8-game heater and playing like a group that is very comfortable with who it is. Their whole personality is built on space, movement, and trust. The ball zips side to side, cutting opens up the lane, and the right guy keeps ending up with the right shot, which sounds almost simple until you realize how many teams try the same thing and fail at it nightly. The numbers quietly back up what your eyes can see. Belmont is piling up about 84 points a game, giving up a little over 71, and shooting the ball at a ridiculous clip from both the field and beyond the arc. They are hitting more than half their shots from the floor and around 40% from deep, and they are not just tossing up a couple of threes here and there. They are living out there with roughly 10 makes a night. Honestly, that kind of efficiency is like showing up to a pickup game with the one friend who never seems to miss. Everyone else has to work twice as hard just to keep up. Here is the twist though. As much as Belmont has a reputation as a three-point factory, they are bullying teams in the paint too. Program notes spell it out clearly. They have outscored opponents by more than 300 points in the lane through 24 games, winning the interior battle in 21 of those contests. That means even on nights when the threes wobble a bit, they still have that steady drumbeat of layups, post seals, and cuts to the rim. And that gives them a very stable scoring floor, especially in hostile gyms that usually punish jump shooting teams. UIC, on the other side of the floor, is not just a background character in this story. The Flames are sitting at 13-11 overall and 8-5 in the Missouri Valley, with a strong 7-3 mark at home, and that home building has become a little bit of a trouble spot for visitors lately. They have strung together a long stretch of wins in the middle of the year, including a statement victory on the road at Bradley and tight grinders against solid league opponents, the kind of run that builds belief in a locker room. They scrap, they crowd ball handlers, and they play with that energized, slightly chaotic edge that makes underdogs fun and dangerous at the same time. Style-wise, UIC leans into effort and pressure. They average around 75 points per game while holding teams to roughly 70, and you can feel how much they lean on defense, rebounding, and creating messes in passing lanes. They pull in more than 11 offensive boards a night, the top mark in the league, and that is not trivial when you are trying to hang with a more efficient offense. Every extra possession is one more chance to make the favorite sweat, and in a loud building that sort of thing snowballs, the crowd senses the hustle and leans into every loose ball. Here is where the matchup math starts to tilt. UIC's attack skews more toward inside the arc, a lot of work in the lane, mid-range looks, trips to the stripe, and just enough threes to keep defenses honest, but they are making only around 6 long balls per game. Belmont, meanwhile, is quite happy to concede some of those twos if it means they get to fire away at volume from deep, and you see it in the way UIC's opponents, across the season, have hit far more threes than the Flames themselves. So you end up in this spot where every empty UIC trip and every clean Belmont three is not just 3 points on the board, it is a little lever pushing the game away from the home side, possession by possession. The road piece might actually be the most calming part of the Belmont case. They are 9-1 away from home, winning in all kinds of gyms, from quiet non-conference floors to loud league arenas, and they have handled close games, quick turnarounds, and travel without losing their identity. That matters in a place like Credit Union One Arena, where runs can come in waves, because a team that knows exactly what it wants to run in the half court and trusts its spacing usually rides out those crowd-fueled surges instead of panicking. So while UIC's energy, hustle on the glass, and defensive pressure can absolutely keep this interesting for long stretches, the combination of Belmont's shooting edge, paint dominance, and road composure keeps nudging the matchup toward a result where the visitors eventually stretch things out beyond that 1 or 2 basket comfort zone late. As our first pick for this matchup, the Belmont Bruins to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Belmont games on their own are sitting in that mid-150s neighborhood, with the Bruins scoring about 84 and allowing just over 71, while UIC contests land closer to the mid-140s, with around 75 scored and about 70 given up. Put those profiles together and you do not need a math degree to sense that this matchup naturally leans toward a pretty lively total. Belmont's offense is not just good, it is elastic. They can win in the half court, they can run off misses, and they can punish you inside or outside depending on what you try to take away. They are shooting over 51% from the field, north of 40% from 3, and they have already hung 80 or more on a long list of opponents this season, including recent back-to-back outings where they cracked the century mark. At the same time, they have that paint advantage that is almost silly on paper, more than 300 extra points inside compared to their opponents through 24 games. Which means layups and post touches are not just a side dish, they are the main course. Even if the threes wobble for a few minutes, the cutting, slips, and rolls to the rim keep the scoreboard moving. UIC, for its part, brings a type of energy that accidentally helps totals climb. They are averaging just over 75 points while holding foes under 71, but it is the way they get there that matters for our purposes. They grab more than 36 rebounds a night, including that league-leading offensive glass work, and they pick off about 8 steals per game, which is a recipe for extra possessions, broken floor chances, and quick swings from defense to offense. Those scramble moments are where games quietly speed up, not because either coach is yelling to run, but because the ball is loose and players are just playing. Free throws are another quiet driver in this matchup. Across UIC games this season, the Flames and their opponents have combined for well over 30 free throw attempts per night, which is a lot of stops in the clock where the score keeps ticking. Belmont's games tell a similar story, with both teams getting to the line consistently, so you have this shared pattern where, especially late, fouls and game management add sneaky points without burning much time. It is the classic bettor's experience. You glance up thinking the game is crawling, and suddenly 3 straight trips to the stripe have shoved the total into a whole new range. There is also something to be said for familiarity. UIC has already seen this offense once this season, and they know that if they sit back too much, Belmont will simply pick their spots and knock down shot after shot. So as the home team, there is a real incentive for the Flames to push tempo after misses, attack before Belmont can get fully set, and trust that their own shooters and drivers can keep pace in a game that drifts higher rather than sinks into a grind. That mindset, combined with the Bruins' natural rhythm and green light from the perimeter, makes a slow, ugly rock fight feel like the less likely script, even if there are a few choppy stretches. Here is the thing. When you blend Belmont's efficient, versatile offense with UIC's willingness to run, crash, and gamble for steals, you end up with a matchup that almost invites long scoring runs on both sides. It is easy to imagine both teams living somewhere in the mid-70s or better, especially if the final few minutes turn into the usual sequence of timeouts, fouls, and possessions stretched out like a rubber band. The ingredients that show up in their season-long profiles, pace, shooting quality, paint scoring, offensive rebounding, and frequent trips to the line, all tilt toward a game that plays faster and scores higher than your typical cautious February showdown. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.